It's mid-September now, and you know, my apple tree is about ready for harvest. Yeah, so I need to harvest some of these today, but also mid-September means glut season, it means autumn is here, and it means it's time to start making loads and loads of preserves. And one of my favourites is autumn chutney, and I know a lot of you have asked in the past, you know, what's your recipe, how do you make it, what is a chutney? So I thought today I'd tell you all about it and show you how I make my favourite autumn chutney. So what is a chutney? And I think it's particularly quite a British, or at least maybe a European delicacy. And a chutney is a preserve that uses sugar, vinegar and a mix of any combination of fruit and vegetables that you simmer down in a big pot and stick it in a jar. It preserves, you seal it, so it will last for at least a year if you do it right. Preserves or chutneys are often eaten with cold meat like hams, or with cheese. You'll often have like a cheese platter with crackers, or you can stick it in a sandwich like cheese and pickle sandwich, the best. And it's just such a great thing to do because you can jar it up and gift it to your family and your friends, or make it into like a Christmas hamper. So that's what a chutney is. This is going to be one of my favourites. I've adapted a recipe that I've been following for a number of years. I will make sure I link it in the description below. So today I first need to harvest a few apples. Now my entire tree is ready for harvest, but I won't be picking all of them today because I don't have time. So I know that I need about 6 or 7 of these. And for this recipe, it doesn't matter too much which apple you choose. They do suggest a cooking apple though, because that tends to keep its shape and doesn't turn to mush. Mine are both edible and cookers, which is great. So yeah, I'm gonna harvest some of these and see you in a bit. I've definitely got enough apples here for today's recipe and a few extras spare as well. I've also got some tomatoes there at the front, which I ripened at home because my tomatoes got blight, but I'm glad I can still use homegrown. And it doesn't matter what sort of tomatoes you want to use for this recipe either, which is great. But I also need to pick some chilies and peppers, so we're going to head into the polytunnel next. Here are where all of my peppers and chilies are now ripening, and for this recipe I'm going to use some of the cayenne. I've got a nice smoky type of spice to these, so I'm going to harvest all the ripe ones actually, and perhaps add 3 to the recipe. So that's pretty much all of the fresh ingredients harvested. I just need to pick up a few other bits on my way home, where I'll see you at home and we'll start doing some cooking. So these are all the ingredients that I need for this recipe, and the first thing we're going to do is to start prepping and chopping. And this is probably what takes the most amount of work for this recipe, and the key is to make sure that all of the pieces are roughly the same size. So that's your apple, your onions, your peppers. You want it all to be about just under sort of like a centimetre cube. And that way it makes for a much better texture and consistency overall in your chutney. And once you've finished prepping all of the vegetables, it's then time to start on the tomatoes. And first of all, you want to peel these, and if you don't know this little trick, you want to score a little cross into the bottom of the tomatoes. And then in the kitchen you want to set a pan of hot water to boil. And you also want to prepare a bowl of ice cubes in some cold water. And what you're going to do is take each of those tomatoes and put them into the pan of boiling water, and you only need to simmer them for about 30 seconds or so, and then immediately take them back out and into the cold water so that they stop cooking. And what this does is it won't cook the tomatoes, but it'll help the skin come away from the tomato, and it should peel away in your hand really easily. Unlike the other ingredients, you don't need to chop the tomatoes too finely because they'll break down anyway, but you do want to make sure you drain off all of that excess liquid. That's really going to help to reduce the simmering time of the chutney on the stove, because that can take a little while. I weighed out my sugar, my raisins, I've cut the chilli really finely. We've also got some ginger and a bit of salt and the sugar as well. So you're going to pop them all into a pan. I tend to put the tomatoes in at the base so there's a bit of wetness there, then the sugar, and just basically you're going to pile everything into the same pan. You do need quite a large pan for this recipe because it's going to fill it to the brim, and you might be worried that it's a little bit too full. Mine really did start to come up over the top, but after a little while it will simmer down and begin to break down, and you shouldn't have any problems with it boiling over. So you want to give it a really good stir, and I've got it here on a medium heat. You want to bring it up to a nice gentle little simmer to get it started, and leave it simmering on a soft boil. And this step could take anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour and a half, so do make sure you have plenty of time on your hands, because what we want is to turn this into a nice sticky sort of golden mixture, and it will really thicken up. But whilst we wait for that to happen, it's time to prepare all of our jars, and you want to sterilise them so that they're safe for jarring. So first you're going to clean them all up with hot soapy water. I will obviously rinse off all of those bubbles in a moment to leave them nice and sparkling clean. And you want to do this with any other utensils that you might be using as well. I like to use a funnel and some metal spoons, which I also sterilise. And you want to clean the lids as well. These are now going onto a baking tray to go into the oven for the remaining sort of 15-20 minutes of this process so that they sterilise. And now the chutney, after a good hour and a half of gentle simmering, has reached a nice rich colour, and it's nice and sticky. It's really thickened, but there's still some sort of liquid remaining. It's not too dry. So this is the sort of consistency that I'm really happy with it for it to go into a jar. When you're ready to jar your chutney, it's really important that you use jars that are still quite warm or even hot from the oven, so be careful, mind your hands. And also I'm using here the hot and sterilised funnel. This is really helpful because it keeps all of that chutney away from the rim of the jar, and if you want to create a good strong seal, you really need to keep that the edge of the jar really clean. And just to make sure it's extra clean, I use a slightly damp kitchen towel and run it around the outside and the top of that rim and the edge, just to make sure there's no residue before tightening the jar and setting it aside. Now, unlike the popular canning technique where you often use a water bath after jarring your food, you don't do that with chutneys. Because of the vinegar and the sugar, that's what preserves it, and the seal is made with the temperature of the jars and the contents. This chutney is still hot from the pan as well. I haven't let it cool, and so it's that change in temperature that creates the air pressure change, which essentially creates the seal on your jars, which I help by flipping the jars upside down for 15 minutes after I filled them, and then I'll turn them back upright. Hey, so I'm back on the allotment, and I thought we'd do a little bit of a taste test now that the chutneys are all done, they're sealed. But one really important thing I must stress, if you've not made a chutney before, is that you're not really supposed to eat them immediately after you've cooked them. In fact, I'll actually wait 3 months until I open the jars. So I usually make most of them September, October, so I'll wait until Christmas, and Christmas Day I'll open the chutneys. And it also means that they're great for giving away as gifts come the festive season. So I won't actually be opening any of the fresh batch that I've just made, but I do here have one of the jars from last year that has not been opened. It's still sealed, so we can take a look at this one, see how it looks, and more importantly how it tastes. So this is last year's autumn chutney, and I could already tell it's lost a little bit of its colour, a little bit of its vibrancy compared to the really redness of this jar, but that's nothing to worry about. It's going to taste great. So got a nice good strong seal on the rim of that jar, and yeah, you can still smell the sweetness in the vinegar, but I think it's going to be a lot better balanced than as you eat it straight out of a fresh jar. So I've got my cracker here. I'm just gonna tuck in. Wow. Cheers. Excuse me. It's sweet, it's sticky, fruity. You're getting those spicy notes come through. All that this needs is a glass of red wine. So good. Whilst you're here, I thought I'd quickly show you my other favourite preserve to make, which is my chilli jam. Unfortunately, I haven't made any yet this year because it's been a terrible year for my chilies, but this one is also from last year. I'm quite surprised I actually found it in the cupboard because this one goes down a storm, particularly with some of my friends. I know Eric absolutely loves this, and so does his family. Hi Diana, if you're watching. But also a new one for me this year is this one, and it's kind of like an Indian inspired curry dip called hang on, let me check it. That's it. It's called tomato kasundi, and this is a recipe that I've picked up from one of my favourite preserve books, The Modern Preserver by Kylee Newton. She's just got another new book come out which is more about how to use your preserves in cooking, but I'm going to give it a little plug because I think it's a great book. I'll put the link in the description if you're interested, but yeah, it's a new one that I've tried from the book this season. Haven't tried it yet, but you know what, I might try it now. Shall I? Let's try it. So let's listen out for that seal. Oh wait, the microphone's down here, isn't it? Nice crack. Oh, it smells so good. Loads and loads of Indian spices in this one, and it's going to be used a bit like a dip, so alongside a curry perhaps, with your naan or poppadom, something like that. I'm just going to use a cracker for now, which is perhaps not the best, and I'm also using the other spoon, but let's just go for it. And yeah, it's got a lot of onion and tomato, quite a lot of spices as well, so I'm keen to see how spicy it is. It might not be ready, but I'm going to try it anyway. Wow. Really aromatic. Oh, that's so good. Oh wow. This one quite spicy actually, but not overbearing, and the balance is actually not too bad for saying I only made it about 3-4 weeks ago. Wow. Yeah, that's really, really good. Nice one, Kylie. You know, when I think back to when I first took on my allotment, which was about 7 years ago, I knew nothing about making jams, chutneys, preserves, or pickling, fermenting, anything like that. And even, you know, in my first and second year, I still didn't do anything like that. But slowly I started to, you know, I started with the jam and then the chutney, and it just, you know, it means you can use so much more of your produce and preserve it for, you know, another year to come, eat it in the winter months, and it's just such an amazing way of keeping your food and making it last longer and enjoying it with other dishes and with all your friends and family. So I'm just so glad that I discovered, you know, making preserves, and I hope that maybe I've inspired a couple of you to give it a go. You know, it might not always work on your first go, but you know, this is what the learning's all about. So I just hope that 1 or 2 of you might give it a try. So I'll put the everything in the description below. Let me know if you give it a go. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video, because it's not my usual thing. So yes, I'm going to just tuck into some of these now, but thanks a lot for joining me, and let me know what your favourite preserve or chutney is in the comments, because mine's this one.